Well, welcome everyone to this technical overview of Umango 25. Obviously, we're introducing this new release of Umango very, very soon. So it'll be great to just spend some time with you going over some of the technical aspects of the new features in Umango 25 and how that might impact you. And if you haven't already familiarized yourself with Umango 25, the beta release is available on our portal. So why don't you get that downloaded and spin it up with an NFR license and have a little play, either before you continue with this video, or maybe you could do it once we've finished. Either way. So let's have a bit of a 1,000-foot view of what's in Umango 25, or sorry, what's in this presentation today. What are we going to cover off? There's obviously a lot of new features in 25, and we can't cover each one of those in minute detail, but we are going to just go through some of the big ticket items, some of the things that are important that you fully understand, that are either changes or additions to the product. So we're going to go through those today. And obviously one category of those which is very significant in Umango 25 is a lot of new AI features. We've packed a lot of additions into 25. Some of the things that you've been giving us some feedback on that you wanted, some of the things that we might have dreamt up ourselves and think you're going to love. So we'll be going through what those new AI features are. Another big new feature introduced into 25 is the introduction of source connectors. So we'll be going through what that means and how that kind of changes or adds some power to what Umango is capable of. So we're going to go through those. Document translation is something that you've been asking for over the years, and we've kind of been able to do in a bit of an ad hoc way, but now we do full document translation available in any of our export connectors. We've also introduced some new MFD brands to our fleet of supported devices, so we'll cover off what that's all about and what brands we will be introducing. The other thing that we get a lot of feedback in is the ability to run our elite tier with a cloud-based queries in AI, being able to run all that on premise. So there's new context, run context being introduced into Umango 25 over the course of the coming months. And we'll be going through what that means and how you go about spinning those up and those kind of things. So there's lots to cover off today. Let's get into it, shall we? Well, AI is where it's at, whether you like it or not. AI is taking over the world. So we are wanting to be on the front foot with that. And as I mentioned earlier, we've already implemented a lot of AI functionality into Umango in Umango 23. Well, there's a lot more in Umango 25, and we think you're going to love it. It's going to make your life easier. We're all about that. So let's just jump in with one of the great new features that we're using in AI is the AI assistant. Now, look, I know we've all seen AI assistants creep into different products, and some of them, to be honest, are pretty ordinary implementations, and they're not much more than a gimmick. So we didn't want to do that. We've done our best to introduce an AI assistant that is genuinely helpful. It's been trained on AI. It knows the technical aspects of AI, and unlike probably most of you, it's actually read the user guide. So it knows how Umango functions. It knows how to do things like create complex merge methods. It'll help you with things like scripting and SQL and those kind of things. It knows our knowledge base. It gets trained on that. So you can just ask a question straight in here, and if it's in our knowledge base, it's probably going to know about it. Really, it's the one-stop shop for all things Umango, and it's probably much cleverer than I am. So you'd be better to go there in most instances, unless your question is very, very specific. Okay, so let's jump in and have a little bit more of a practical look at this. Let's pretend we're in a job here. And we'll go across to our zones. Let's create a new zone. And let's imagine for a minute that we're trying to reference as a default value this government zone down here. We want to make sure that when we reference it, we don't have any hyphens in it. So we know we want to do a replace. So we go replace. Oh, yeah, that goes to be helpful here. And I want to get government. Yep, that's the zone I want. I want to replace that with, replace all the hyphens with underscores. Now, we all know that that would work. But let's say we forgot that comma and I start to get this wrong. I get prompted that my syntax is wrong, but I might not fully understand that. It's all getting too hard. So I can see here that AI Assistant is prompting me. So let's just have a look. And AI Assistant pops up. It passes in information about the merge method I'm trying to build. And let's just see if it's able to correct my syntax for me and explain a little bit more about why my merge method went wrong and certainly how it's going to function correctly. So we can see here it's fixed our syntax for us. It's explained how the syntax works. And then it's gone and passed in the correct values with everything corrected for me. So this is how it should be structured. Nice. So I could now copy that and close this down, paste it in here. Oh, look at that. It's going to work perfectly. So there's a nice practical way that AI Assistant, obviously if when you're building very complex merge methods too, if you can kind of explain it to the AI Assistant what you're trying to do with nested merge methods and replace and if commands and these kind of things, Umango will help you build that out for you and explain how those work, those kind of things. I don't know about you, but sometimes when you get deep into a nested merge method, it can get quite complex to make sure you've got your commas in the right places and those kind of things. So it can be very helpful in those situations. So let's maybe look at a different scenario. What about let's say I wanted a zone script of some sort. What about that? So let's say I want to do a currency conversion. So what about this? Write me a zone script in, let's say, C# that takes a US dollar value as a program argument and returns the value converted to euros using a free online web API. I hope there is one. Okay, let's just see what, oh, I just realized I've done a little typing error there. That's not unlike me. Hopefully the AI assistant will be able to accommodate from my shortcomings, which I'm sure it can. I can see that it's consulting Einstein there, which is good. Taking a moment. And all right, we've got ourselves a response. Let's just see what Umango's done here. So it's created a program for me. I can see it's using. Let me make sense of this. Okay, so you can see we're reading our program argument. So this would be how we'd pass in the zone value that you'd be familiar with when we're running a zone script. So it's taken our zone argument, treating it as US dollars, making sure it's a numeric, which is good. And then we are doing our conversion. We're calling this function here, calling the API, passing in our value and returning a US dollar amount, which is a euro dollar amount. And we're outputting it using a console out command, which is correct. So that would work magnificently, I would expect. It would just be a matter of doing a compile on that now. And of course, you're not stuck with using C#. You know, if you've got another programming language, fortunately, the AI assistant is au fait with pretty much all programming languages. So anything you're familiar with using in Umango in the past, you can certainly use and ask AI assistant to help you with using that programming language as well. So let's take a little look at maybe some other ways we can use the AI assistant. Let's say we're wanting to build an ODBC lookup, and I've got a database here. I think this one works. Okay, And I really don't know what I'm doing here. And I get into editing SQL and it's all becoming unstuck. You can see here, I've got the ability to just call on the AI assistant to help me with my SQL. So if I click on that, it's passing into it all the fields and table names and everything I've got access to. So it knows some context around the SQL command that I'm trying to build, and it will provide me some options. So you can see here, what is it actually saying? Build an SQL from ODBC lookup and related field. You need to specify what you need to retrieve, which is correct. Now, interestingly, so this database uses, what is that, French? It's actually converting that nicely for us and explaining it in English and passing in some queries, giving me some options for multiple returns, which is nice too, and even explains that it's the search value um, that we're querying on here. So reasonably effective and kind of a functional response. So that's the AI assistant. You can pretty much ask it anything you like in Umango. It doesn't have to be code based. It could just be, how to do things, those kind of things. And I mentioned before that it's across our knowledge base, so you can ask it questions relating to that as well. So that's our AI assistant. All right, moving along. One of the new things we've introduced is, so we're familiar with Ask AI in Zones, but in the past, whenever we've done an Ask AI, it's been utilized as a Smart Seek function. And really what we're doing is we're just passing in some OCR text off a region of the document and asking AI a question relating to the text itself. Well, in Umango 25, we're able to ask questions of the zone image, not just the text. So this kind of opens things up a fair bit as to what we can actually do with, with AI with respect to images. So let's just jump across to Umango for a moment. I've actually got this job here that does do some queries relating to that. So I've got a zone here called document category. And you'll see we've got a new zone type now, which is Ask AI. And it prompts us to ask, what question do we want to ask about the image area? So in this case, I'm saying, what type of document is this? Select from invoice, logistics, advertising, report, or correspondence. So it's going to analyze that image area and go, okay, what type of document are we looking at here? Let's hit test, let it run on that. And in this case, the zone is the entire page area. But of course, you could choose a smaller region on the document, whatever's relevant for the particular query that you're wanting to carry out. And come on, AI. All right, so we can see here in this instance, it's telling us it's correspondence. And if you look at our zone types, our response types that we were asking about, I actually think that's the most relevant. So invoice, logistics, advertising, report, or correspondence. Yeah, I actually think that's probably the best answer. I've got another one here that's saying, is this a government document? So again, this is an Ask AI type. So is this a government document? So it's going to analyse that. And I suspect it's probably looking at, this is the Australian government crest, so it's probably looking at that and saying, yeah, so there we go, it is a government document. But, the sky's the limit on what you can do with that. You can ask it pretty much any question you like. Another neat thing about the Ask AI function is you can include a reference image. So one of the examples that Umango gives there is, does the Umango appear somewhere? Does the logo appear somewhere in the image area? So you might have a logo and you want to query documents and say, is this logo on the document? Because if it is, you might want to do something different with it. So we can just upload an image and it'll be kept against this zone, and then queries are done contextually based on that reference image. All right, so that's Ask AI. I know you'll have lots of questions. I should also point out that you're not limited to just asking image-based queries with that. So if you're doing an Ask AI, you can still ask text-based queries. You can still say things like, get for me the, I don't know, invoice number or social security number or something like that from an image area, and it will return the value for you. So a lot of flexibility there. It's not taking away from what Ask AI did before. It's adding to it. And in fact, the Smart Seek, if we go to OCR here, you'll see that Ask AI is still available here within Smart Sync in exactly the same way as it was before. So we're not taking anything away there. Okay. All right. So a new area of AI is custom document types. So this is something you guys have been asking a lot for. So we've had some pre-trained document types like invoice and contract and the likes that you've been using along your merry way, but often you'll have a use case where a customer has a document that doesn't really fall into any of those categories, and the documents maybe aren't so structured. So the structured document type is not particularly effective or useful. Then we've introduced the ability to train new document types. And I should point out too that when you train a document type and you apply it to a job, you can um, you can back up that job, so export it to a UMJ type, and you can pass it to someone else with another license, so a customer, providing they are in the same AI region that your license is running in. You can pass them that job, and they can run the job using that custom AI document type. They'll not be able to select it on new jobs, but they will be able to make use of the job you've passed them. So that's a neat little thing to know. But let's dig in, have a bit of a look. Let's jump across to, actually before I do, there is something I wanted to mention there, and that's about premium page consumption. So custom document types, whenever you are processing documents with a custom document type, you will be consuming pages in your license at a faster rate than you do on a normal page processor. So rather than just one for one, so for every page you process in Umango or you export in Umango, you consume one page. With custom document types, you'll be consuming a multiple of that. And I believe that the default is you'll be consuming 4 pages for each one page that you process. So there is an additional premium, and it's not directly linked to cost, but it's kind of indirectly linked to cost. For customers that are high volume, it's certainly something to keep an eye on. All right, so let's jump across to Umango again, and we're going to look at, actually, let's just go into our document types. So these are all the trained document types that I've already trained. So let's go into this one, WA Seniors card. All right, so you can see here, I have a document with a whole bunch of fields that I've trained Umango on, and each one of these fields, so these are some check boxes. Looks like this one is a field I've called first name. I tell it the type of field that it is. So this is a text field, but it could be a signature panel, a check mark, or part of a table, a cell within a table or a list of values. And importantly, when I'm training Umango, I need to tell the training function the value in the field that should be returned. So this is a key part of training, is this is what I expect to see when you see this image. So in this case, on this document, first name is Sullivan. This is handwritten. So let's pretend we want to add a new one. Let's say I want to read this here, replacement seniors card. I want to read this checkbox here. So we're going new field, and add a check mark, and I'm going to call it replacement card, and it's a check mark, and in this case it's unchecked. So I'm adding that to my my fields, and I've only added it on my first document, but I need to have a handful of documents to train with. So you'll see I've got 5 here. So when I jump to my second document, that field is not quite in the right place, so I need to move it. So in this document, in this sample, that's where I'm going to find the value. And in this case, it's also unchecked. And I need to do this on, in fact, that's not aligned very well. I don't want to be too finicky about it, but we want to get that aligned well. And then move to document 3. So same deal, this one's not quite in the right location. I want it to be about here. And again, that is unchecked. Don't worry, I'm nearly there. Move to this one. Let's get that there. And that's unchecked as well. And actually now, I've got to do one more, but if I now try to train the document, I've got to hit save. If I try and chain it, you must provide values in every field before you can start training. So because I haven't included a value on my last document, I haven't got it right, it's asking me to confirm. So I'll get that in the right location. And I'll give it a value, hit save, and I could then go ahead and train. Now, it's asking me some questions here, one question in particular, and that is whether this is a structured or an unstructured document type. So I think you guys are kind of familiar with that industry term, but structured document is the information in roughly the same region on every single document, or is it likely to be in very different locations, the same information but in different locations in the document? So when we go to train, we need to tell our training engine what type of document structure this is, and it affects the training engine that we are going to utilize. So in this case, these documents are relatively structured, so I could certainly select the structured layout. But I should point out that if I'm going to train on unstructured documents, there are some fields. Signature actually is the main feature. There's some functions that we can't support in unstructured, and signature panels is one of them. So you'll note that if you were to add a signature panel to your training fields, this option would be disabled. You wouldn't be able to select it. Okay, so we then go ahead and give it a name, and we hit start training, and the training process would commence. It can go on in the background. You can close the document type down. You can go off and do other things. And when it's complete, it'll be available for you to utilize in your job. So let's just back out here. I won't start the training because it's going to take a little while. I'll close that. And if I go back to my jobs here and I go to seniors card, I had previously trained this. You'll see I've got a very similar document, and you can see it's assigned the WA seniors card here. And in fact, what I might do, if I disable those AI fields, and let's pretend I'm going to re-enable it again, you can see that I have all the standard document types that you'd be familiar with, invoices and contracts and business cards, whatever the standard pre-trained types. But I've also got all these other ones that I've trained here as well. So in this case, we're talking about, where's it gone, seniors card. So I add seniors card and enable it. This is where we're talking about the premium document type. So in this case, we're going to be consuming pages or page credits at 4 times the normal rate. So we just use as a reminder before they accept it. I'm going to go yes. And then it queries the document, not unlike we would with any other pre-trained document type. And you can see it's identified that information. And it hasn't identified the field that I just added because I haven't trained it yet. So I've created that on my document type. I've made that change, but I haven't trained it, so it's not yet rolled out to the jobs that are associated with the document type. And that's custom document types. You'll find that they are highly accurate. They are very, very powerful, very, very effective, particularly the unstructured type. Uses that large language model that we're all familiar with, and you'll find these to be very effective. But of course, there's always a payoff, and that is that you're going to be consuming pages at a faster rate. So something you need to keep in mind, and certainly be notifying your customers of so there's no nasty little surprises. All right, so source connectors, this is all new in Umango 25. You'll be familiar in previous versions of Umango that you could, of course, watch a folder or watch an email account, and they were kind of the limits outside multifunction devices of entry points into Umango. Well, in Umango 25, it's all new. You now can connect to lots of different sources or locations that documents might reside. And these are watched. This isn't kind of a pull or a push. This is Umango sitting and watching a repository of some sort and waiting for files to come along that meet whatever the filter criteria might be, and then ingest those files, process them, and push them to wherever the location they're required. So this is all new. We've built and are releasing in Umango 25 a handful of connectors, and this will be something much like our export connectors that will be growing over time. But there's not an insignificant number of import connectors or source connectors that we're introducing in Umango 25 at the outset. So that's a great place to start. But you can imagine that this is it introduces a whole bunch of new use cases that we can support. So not just being able to process documents, but also being able to migrate documents from one repository to another, or migrate based on some rules. So you want to migrate only PDF documents or only Word documents or whatever it might be. These connectors give you a great deal of flexibility. And the other thing is that you can you don't just add one connector, or you don't have to just add one connector to a job or a classifier in Umango. You can add as many import connectors or source connectors as you might like, and they will all be processed through that job. So a lot of flexibility there. But I do need to point out that the introduction of this has necessitated a small change to the way we calculate the source licensing. So in the past, you could have numerous different jobs, and if they were all watching the same folder, that would consume one source. Some of you might not even be familiar with that kind of efficiency, but if you're having a number of jobs watch the exact same source, as in the same folder or the same email account, then that would only consume one source. And it was only when you started adding jobs that are watching different types of source or different source locations that you would be consuming more source as well. In Umango 25, every time you add a connector into Umango, whether you're adding it into a job, whether you're adding it into a classifier, you are consuming a source. So you need to be mindful of that. They're great little things, but source connectors consume a source. Now, I should also point out that this doesn't in any way affect our device source licensing. So you can, you can push as many jobs as you like to the one multifunction device. That will consume one device source exactly the same way as it has historically. So it's not a big shift in the way we're licensing. In fact, in nearly all instances, it will actually have no impact at all on the way you do your calculations, but there may be a few that are affected. So it's important to keep that at the forefront of your mind when you're kind of calculating the number of sources required and putting budgets together, those kind of things. That needs to be allowed for. The other great thing about import sources or connector sources is that we're not just picking up the document, we're also picking up the metadata that relates to that document. So all the metadata fields that might be associated with it, the source locations. So if it's come from some sort of a folder structure, then we have that information available. It's come from an email, we know what email address it's come from, we know the folder that it was pulled from. Those kind of things are all available as merge field metadata on our export connector side, and we'll show you in just a moment on how you go about accessing that metadata and how it's held in Umango. So let's jump across to Umango and have a bit of a look, shall we? So I've got a job that is called, very appropriately, read SharePoint. So this particular job, its source is SharePoint as a source. And in this case, that is the structure that we're reading from. So it's actually my SharePoint account. It's reading our company site, and we have a library in there called product development. And of course, like all good libraries, it has a folder called miscellaneous. So we're looking at our miscellaneous folder. This is just a hint source. So this is just, so I'm looking, if I've got 5 different source connectors here, it's nice to be able to, at a glance, be able to see which connector is looking at what. So that gives me a bit of it's what we call a hint. It's just an idea of what it's looking at. But I can dig into the configuration here, and I can see that we are looking at our SharePoint site called company. and I've browsed to the folder miscellaneous. I'm checking this folder every minute, but we could check that less frequently if we wanted it to be a bit less of an overhead. Um, and I'm saying check subfolders too. So I don't just want to check the miscellaneous folder, I want to check all its child folders as well. I've got some post-processing options. So I might want to read files, but once I've processed them, I may want to move them. So in this case, I've got it set to not do anything with them, but I could actually say, look, once I've pulled it from SharePoint, I just want to delete it, or I can move it to another folder somewhere else in SharePoint as well once I've processed it. So that's a nice little feature. And then I've got some filter rules too. So I can filter, in this case, I'm filtering based on document type, and I can, any of the document types that Umango can read, I can filter based on. I can filter it using a regex based on the file name. And in this case, I could also pick it up based on the author. So I might only want to get documents that I created and process them. So I can filter based on that as well. So obviously each source connector has a bunch of different filtering rules and post-processing options and a few things like that, which you will no doubt become familiar with. But that broad brush concept of being able to connect to a source, identify an area within that source, a repository or a folder, whatever might be relevant for the source connector, and then select some rules around how to filter for what I actually want to be able to pull or what I want to watch for. That broad brush concept applies to each connector, each source connector within Umango. All right, so we've got ourselves a source connector. Now, if we jump across to our destinations here, I've got an export connector, which is our wonderful merge text connector, which I know you'd be all familiar with. If I jump across to my text output and I go to the output body here, I'm actually going to delete that so I can recreate it. So I've decided that I want to output a JSON file here, and let's let Umango just populate that by default for me. And you can see, let me just zoom in here. It's another neat feature in Umango 25 is the ability to zoom merge fields. Much easier to see and get to the data. But in this case, I'm doing an iteration of my source connector. So SharePoint's my source connector. I'm wanting to look at the source data, and I'm going to iterate the number of times that we have items of data in our data array, if you like. And I'm creating in each of those iterations, I'm outputting the name of the data field that I'm creating, and I'm outputting the value of that data field as well. And this here is just to identify whether we're at the last row, because if we are, we need a comma after our JSON, that's all. And we close out our iteration. So relatively simple. So actually, I think I've got a slide here. Let me just jump across to my slides again. And you can see, so this was the source we were just looking at. What does that create? Well, this is what it creates for us. So we've got a nice JSON file with all the metadata relating to this document. So the document that we're looking at here was some document called caltex.pdf, and it's in this weird location. I honestly don't even know what that is, but anyway, the document author was me. I should know about it, but I don't. And it's outputted a whole bunch of metadata that's found on that. So in this case, I don't think we've really got any. I probably could have used a better example, to be honest, but in that, if it did have any column data, some column naming, then that would be included here as a field of metadata output to my destination. So you can see iterations work not unlike iterations in line items that you'd be familiar with. Same deal, we're looping through each of the metadata fields, but in addition, we can also refer to the data as a field name. So if you happen to know exactly what the field name is, jumping across to Umango again, if I've got a field name that I just happen to know, so if I go SharePoint, in fact, probably the easiest way to do this, if I just go SharePoint. Okay, so I've got my fields here. So this is what we were just iterating. You can see these are the asterisk indicating that we've got an array populated there, but I've also got access to each of my fields by name. So if I want to output SharePoint data and I want to refer to the document author. Remember, the document author that we talked about before was Quentin Gribble. In fact, let me just, so we're real clear here, let me jump across there again. You can see we've got a field called document author, which is Quentin. And so if I wanted to refer to that specifically, then I could also just select it that way. That's going to name my document or name my JSON file the document author of the document that we've imported. So lots of ways to get to that data and refer to it, either specifically or just by looping through each of those fields of metadata. All right. Moving right along into classifiers, document classifiers. So in the past, you would be familiar with what we called watch folder jobs. They are no more. We no longer have watch folder jobs. We've kind of morphed them into what we now call classifiers, and classifiers have been expanded to have a whole new feature set. And one of the wonderful things about document classifiers is that rather than just being able to watch folders, which is what our watch folder jobs could do, document classifiers can watch any of the document sources in exactly the same way as jobs can watch document sources. So you can add as many document sources as you like to a document classifier as well. So let's just jump in back into Umango here. If I go, I got some, no, I don't. So let me create a document classifier. Let's give it a name. My classifier, very creatively named. And you can see I've got some options here. So again, this is another feature that we've been asked for a number of times, and that is the ability to not classify every page, not to try and process every single page and classify it or do document recognition on every page, but just based on the file itself, or the first page in the file. So you'll probably find that you'll have this enabled most of the time, because what has become obvious to us is that people tend to process documents through classifiers one at a time, as one file at a time. So if you select this option, you're going to find that it'll be much more accurate. So it's not going to try and validate or classify a page that is a follower page that really doesn't fit into the classifier type. So this is typically what you're going to want to select. And then within that feature set, you've got some types of classifying to do as well. So in the past, we've always used this option where you're classifying based on the separation rules within the jobs that you're assigning to the classifier. So now we can also use automatic layout recognition and just use that as a unique way of classifying our documents as well. Providing obviously we have enough samples in our jobs, then we can use the classification engine to work out which jobs those documents should go to. Okay, jump across to the source tab. This is almost identical to the source tab in our jobs management UI, in that we can add source connectors in exactly the same way that we talked about before. And there's my SharePoint connector, and this is what we'd be looking at. But of course, I can add whatever I like. Let's say I want to add Office 365. I've got an Office 365 connector there as well. So I set up whatever sources I want that this classifier is going to process. Oh, I should also point out that I can add classifiers to the document drop in exactly the same way as I add jobs to the document drop. So that's nice too. So we can have multiple classifiers. You can just drag and drop documents onto them directly in the document drop. It's just a matter of checking the box. Okay, so I've got no job suitable, of course. Let's see if I have got something. Here we go. Okay, so the reason I didn't have any jobs available there is because I had selected separation rules and I had no jobs configured. Of all my jobs, I didn't have any configured with separation rules that are suitable for using as classifications. So I'm going to use my classification engine, and these are the jobs that meet the criteria for my classification engine. And you can see here the ones I have. So let's say I want to say, oh, I want to process this one and my shipping docs and invoices. So I want to classify each of these. And I also have the option to select a default So if I'm processing these documents and Umango is unable to work out which job to place the documents in, I could select, just say, or put all of them in the Ask AI demo job. Or I could create another job, which is just going to take those documents and set them aside into a folder, for example. And in which case I would say, and let's assume for a minute that this was one of those jobs, I could make that my default job. So it's going to classify my documents, but any documents it can't classify, it's going to push through this default job, and they could go into just a holding pattern in another folder somewhere. Or you might even set that job up for manual intervention, and you could do real-time reassignment onto its relevant job. So there's a lot of flexibility there now that we've introduced this default concept, which we didn't have previously in the watch folder jobs, which is nice. And you still, of course, have all our image enhancements that apply to all incoming documents. So that's our document classifiers. Okay, so some new brands coming to Umango in Umango 25. So Epson and Fujifilm will both be supported. Epson will be supported on release. Fujifilm's lagging a little bit behind. Some of those programmers just aren't doing their work right, and we're taking a little bit longer than we had anticipated, but it's not far behind. You'll see that being introduced very, very soon. I should point out that this is not actually public information yet. We've not made any official announcement, so I'm making you aware of this for future reference sake, but please don't make this public just yet. We want to choose our time carefully on when that is made public. Okay, so new brands. We've also got an all-new scan actuator for Twain sources, and it's important because we've changed the way that we are identifying sources in Umango. So when I say sources, I mean device-based sources. So in the past, we've always identified sources using an IP4 address. We're moving away from that, and we'll be identifying sources, for example, multifunction devices, based on their serial number, not their IP address. And the same is true of Twain sources. So that meant we need to be able to identify a workstation uniquely, and it's our scan actuator that's doing that. And in fact, if I move to my next slide, you'll see that the new scan actuator has a workstation ID, and that is what's going to show up in the devices. When you do a device search, you will see Twain devices with their relevant serial number, and that is, of course, device specific or workstation specific. Now, you can just paste this in. You literally can do a force discovery and paste in the serial number if it's not discovered. If you want it to be discoverable, then once you've installed the workstation scan actuator, on that workstation, if you load the Twain interface, as in the menu item within Umango that launches the Twain scanning functionality, that will pick up that workstation ID, assign it to your session, and then Umango is able to identify it that way and find it across your network. So it saves you having to do that copy and paste and all the difficulty that goes along with it, particularly if it's a workstation across the network somewhere. It'll automatically pick that up for you. You'll be able to check it off and use that as a Twain source. So again, just to make it clear, we are moving away from being IP-based with identifying our device sources uniquely. We are moving exclusively to a serial number-based device source in Umango 25. And some of you may wonder why we're doing that. Well, there's a number of reasons. One is because, as you well know, there are occasions when IP addresses can change, and that can be frustrating because you can think you've assigned a device a source, and then the IP of the device changes, and then it's no longer a source, and your jobs don't show up because the DHCP service decided to reassign its IP. So that can be frustrating. And of course, if we are identifying it based on its serial number, then that will never change. The other reason is what we're going to be talking about in just a minute is cloud-based hosting. So where we are moving Umango to being able to offer a cloud solution. We're obviously not able to sniff out local IP4 addresses, so we need a way of identifying those devices, and it's with serial numbers that we'll be doing that. So this is one step towards that cloud hosting option, and a necessary one in order to be able to deliver on that. Which is a nice segue into talking about installation contexts. So I should be clear up front here that on launch date of Umango 25, what we are launching is our hybrid context of Umango, which is essentially the same context that you are familiar with Umango 23, in that most processing occurs on premise, but for users that are utilizing elite-based features, which is essentially the AI features, they still will be occurring in the cloud, on Umango servers in the cloud. So that's not changing on release date. However, we do have plans that are coming thick and fast behind, and that will be to introduce two other hosting contexts, as we're calling them. One is, as I mentioned, a fully hosted cloud solution that Umango will be hosting. You will not have to have any resident on-premise servers. You'll just be able to log into Umango, or customers will be able to log into Umango in the cloud, and everything will be done there. The other is the exact opposite. So you'll be able to run a fully on-premise solution where nothing occurs in the cloud. There'll still be some licensing issues, so you will still need to have those servers be able to access the Umango servers periodically, but there'll be no data or document-related data or documents being passed to and from the cloud. So obviously that's going to satisfy a lot of your government and enterprise customers that have been asking for this. We plan on delivering that soon. And one other thing that I haven't got there on that slide for you to look at is also support for Linux installs as well. So historically, Umango has only been able to run on Windows servers. We will be introducing support for Linux and being able to run on Linux servers. And I guess that really, when I mention this, I guess I'm talking about hybrid solutions. And as part of this too, you'll be able to launch, and when I say running on Linux servers, I'm talking about running natively on Linux servers. In addition, and quite separately, you will also be able to run Umango in Docker containers as well. We'll be releasing a Docker image, and you'll have the option to run hybrid in Docker, or in fact on-premise in Docker as well. So lots of flexibility that we're introducing this year. You pretty much can run Umango in just about any environment you could possibly imagine, and on just about any OS platform as well. So a lot of flexibility. But these are things that we're rolling out over the course of this year. Initially, we're releasing Windows-only hybrid installs. That'll be our first step in this direction. Following soon after that, you'll find we'll be making available a Linux install, a Linux hybrid install, followed by a Docker install, and then a Docker on-premise install option where everything is running fully on-premise, containerized. And then later this year, we will also be offering a fully hosted cloud solution. So lots going on, lots of exciting things there. I really think that your customers are going to love this great amount of flexibility that we're going to be offering. To flexibility, there's always downsides. So there are some things that we can't support in different contexts, which you've probably just been looking at on this slide that we have presented right now. But some of them will be very obvious. So obviously, when we're running in cloud, we obviously are not going to be allowing customers to run scripts on our servers. And it's also going to mean that ODBC queries will be limited as well. So you're not going to be able to do those. We're going to be locking down things like AI engine choices and this, not so much flexibility, but we're going to meet the masses needs. And another thing, obviously, you're not going to be able to do network folder sources or destinations for obvious reasons, but you will have access to things like, Dropbox source connectors and destination connectors, which will essentially enable that watching local folders and those kind of things too, just by doing cloud syncing, those kind of things. So you're not really losing too much there. It's also going to mean that in cloud-based scenarios, there are some MFDs that are not going to support a kind of a cloud hosting environment. Um, so we won't be able to support those. Others may be able to, but are going to require a complete rewrite of our embedded, so they're going to lag behind a little bit. But I would anticipate that on launch we will be able to support some of those. Probably the other notable mentions there are computing requirements. If you're going to run Umango on premise using image-based Ask AI and doing queries on images and those kind of things in documents, that is incredibly computer processing intensive, and you're probably going to need a GPU and blah, blah, blah. So just bear in mind, it might seem all nice to be able to run everything on premise, but you're going to consume a chunk of processing power to do it, and it's not always practical. So there is a payoff. So it really depends on what your customer's use case is as to how practical it will be to run fully on-prem. And we can work with you on making those decisions. And as we move towards offering on-premise and cloud solutions, you'll see a lot more documentation coming out around what that means, what that looks like, the limitations and those kind of things. And I should also mention that on the portal, we've updated some of our documentation ready for Umango 25. So have a look at that. It includes some of this information in readiness for the move to some of these changes. So some of that information is there already. And just lastly, that bottom item there, the custom training modes. One limitation of running fully on-prem is that we can't support the unstructured training. So you'll need to be using, if you're going to do custom training documents, you're going to be limited to just structured or reasonably structured documents for custom document types. If you're going to need the flexibility of neural models and highly flexible unstructured document types, you're not going to be able to run that on-prem. So just bear that one in mind as well. All right. Document translation. Again, this is something that we've had a lot of requests for in the past, and something that we have introduced in a very seamless way, actually, in Umango 25. It's available in any connector, but it's only available on some output types. So if I jump here into a job and go to my destinations, configure file types, you'll see by default here I've selected the TIFF format and I have no translation options for TIFF. But if I select an OCR type of some sort, so let's say a Word document, I then can translate. Again, this is a premium feature, so you will be consuming pages at a higher page rate, much like custom documents. And I can honestly, we just about support every language known to man. And in the same way, it doesn't matter what the language source is. So you can be translating from pretty much any language to just about any language, even Afrikaans, as it turns out. So there you go. So these are supported in all the OCR types, and we've also included it in PDF image only as well. So in this instance, it will overlay an image snippet of the translated text. So yeah, if you've got color on your documents and that, to be honest, it's not visually as pleasing as you would perhaps like it to be, but it will still do your translation. But certainly with all the fully editable text types like Word documents and Excel spreadsheets, those kind of things, it's all seamless and it's a beautiful thing. So have a play and see what you think there. Actually, I should just cover off. So the supported formats are Excel, Word documents, PowerPoint, PDF, searchable PDF, text, and HTML types. So they are the output formats that support document translation at this point in time. Okay. Execution rules. So this is an all new feature. So on the output, every export connector in Umango has the option of including a execution rule. So this is a rule around whether the export connector should execute or not, should it run. So you might have a handful of connectors in Umango And every document that gets processed based on some rules, they may or may not be be exported off to that connector. Um, so I'm trying to, on my feet, trying to think of an example, but let's say we're categorizing documents using some extracted text. We might say if the document is a invoice, then we want to pass that through this particular connector because this connector processes invoices. If it's not, then we just want to drop it into a folder. So you'd have another rule there for your network folders connector, and that would process it. So we can really use any of our merged index values, and we can create a merge rule. And as is explained here, there's a number of criteria that need to be met in order for the connector to run. If you just leave it empty, the connector will run. The other thing too is you can have it just quietly in the background not run, or you can set it to fail with an error, an export error, and it'll sit there. It'll stop the connector from, or stop the batch from being exported, and it'll sit as a deferred batch, and you'll have some history, export history comment explaining that the execution rule failed. So you have some options there on whether it's silent or whether it's more more in your face and requiring user intervention or not. So that's a neat little feature. I think you're going to grow to love that. Providing a lot more flexibility, rules-based, and a little bit more what you might call workflow-based rules within Umango, built around some regex or whatever you might want to use. And then a similar kind of thing is source priorities. So we're introducing the concept of being able to change the priority of documents within the import queue. So where you've got Umango watching a lot of different sources, a lot of different locations, sometimes you can end up with a queue with hundreds, sometimes thousands of documents in it, and they're all being merrily processed along. But then you've got another job that has a very high priority documents that should be processed. So here's a typical example. You've got documents just ticking away in the background and being processed, and then some big knob CEO comes along and says, I need this document processed immediately. Well, his job could be set to a high priority, and when documents go through that job, they automatically will go to the top of the queue. And prioritizing is not high priority, low priority kind of concept. It's based on a numeric, and you really can have as many many priority levels as you need in the system. So you've got a lot of flexibility there in ensuring that documents are being processed in the priority or in the order that suits the particular use case. Okay, and authentication. So in the past, we have provided scripting options in authentication, which has meant there's a fair bit of flexibility on how users can log in, but we haven't been able to support the flexibility that is provided when we are natively supporting products like Microsoft Azure and Google Identity Platform or Google Authentication. Although you can do that in a script, what that doesn't do for you is provide the ability to, to filter jobs and batches based on user groups and those kind of things. Well, we've introduced that. So not only can you just now select, I want to use Microsoft Azure for users to log in with all the benefits, including single sign-on, those kind of things. But it also means that when we're setting up jobs and the like, you can use Azure or Google user groups to assign them to jobs for access permissions and those kind of things, and they'll be filtered based on those kind of rules as well. So nice. The other thing there we've added is deeper support for LDAP authentication. So you can now just use the LDAP authentication option rather than having to use scripting and that kind of thing for LDAP. And we've kept in place the Windows/domain authentication, which is what you are historically familiar with. where Umango will allow you to log in to the dashboard using any user that you can log into the Umango server with. Well, we're moving away from that. Well, we're not moving away from that model. We're adding to that model and giving you more flexibility. All right, just a few more quick, short, sharp things that we'll go through here that kind of didn't fall into those categories, but are important things that you understand as we move forward. So we've done some improvements to to OMR zones. I don't know if you've played with our OMR feature in Umango 23, but it's perhaps not as accurate as we would have liked it to have been. So we've done some improvements there, but it has meant that our OMR zones no longer support signatures like they have in the past. If you want to do signature recognition, you're best to do that with a custom AI document and you'll get really good results there. So just something to bear in mind. It also can be a breaking change. So if you've got customers using OMR zones, and I'm talking about OMR zones, I'm not talking about OMR checkboxes in AI document types. I'm talking about OMR zone types. So where you've got customers that are using OMR zone types historically, it will be a breaking change for them in Umango 25 if they are using OMR zone types for signatures. They'll continue to work fine if they're using it for checkbox recognition, but not for signatures. We're also introducing handwriting support in ABBY in Umango 25. So as you know, Umango 23, we supported handwriting in our cloud engine, but not in ABBY. Well, that's there in ABBY. So the only reason that is a great thing is it means that you have handwriting support in on-premise. But I would also always suggest to you that our cloud engine actually has better handwriting support than ABBY. It just works more reliably. ABBY's still very good, I should point out. It's certainly nothing to complain about, but just due to the nature of how the cloud AI engine works with handwriting recognition, it actually is genuinely better at reading handwriting than I am. There's been plenty of times where I've looked at some handwriting and I haven't been able to work out what it says. I pass it through the AI ICR engine and it's like, yeah, that would be right. And it's just based on the neural model training. It's obviously seen every imaginable permutation of handwriting and therefore it's able to read it very, very accurately. The Sharp embedded not being available at release. Yeah, so there are breaking changes in Umango 25, predominantly because we're moving to .NET 6 in Umango 25, which I should have also mentioned earlier. Oh, I think I do further down the list. It means that we need to rewrite our Sharp embedded, and we're still working on that. So it's going to miss our launch date, but it will be not too far behind. We'll be supporting Sharp devices as well. So watch this space on that one. There's a new merge method, which is the JSON encode merge method. Very necessary if you're outputting to JSON. So instead of doing a big replace merge method, you can just wrap any JSON values or any values that are being passed into your JSON text, wrap it up in a JSON encoder and it'll encode that nicely for you to make sure it's valid JSON, much like our HTML encode merge method that you may or may not be familiar with. The merge method zoom option, I think we talked about this. So you have the option when you're clicking into merge fields in Umango to have them zoom on screen. Really nice for when you're doing long and convoluted merge methods. Trying to type them and scroll back and forth left and right can be a pain. So you're now able to zoom those optionally, which is good. And as I just mentioned, Umango 25 is built on the .NET Core technology. On release, it'll be .NET 6, but we'll be following that path in the future. So it's one of the things that enables us to be able to move to a broader operating system platform. So, and there's speed enhancements and all sorts of things that come with that too. So lots of benefits there. There's also some just general improvements to our pre-trained AI document types that you'll see. Just more accurate, better accuracy, particularly with some of the benefits in the invoice document type. There's improvements into the way information is presented and identified there, so that's a good thing. There's significant speed improvements for AI document processing. Yeah, so when in the past we're processing AI document types in Umango, it was done when we push documents to the cloud for processing, they were done synchronously or one at a time. So even if you had you'd licensed 8 AI document processors, they would still be processed one at a time. It would be a bottleneck in the processing. Well, in Umango 25, we've changed that. And if you are now running 8 document processor licenses in Umango, or any number for that matter, but I'm just picking 8, then 8 documents will be processed in the cloud for AI document processing concurrently. So there's a very significant speed improvement there for AI document processing, where you're paying for or where you've licensed multiple processors. And that's a carryover. So that's not for licenses that are purchased in 25. If you've got a Umango 23 license that's using multiple concurrent processors, they will just get the benefits when they move to Umango 25, which is awesome. I've referenced some of the documentation on the portal a little earlier, but there is documentation on the portal for Umango 25. There is more coming. The user guide has already been updated for Umango 25. So if you follow the bouncing ball and the links in Umango 25, you'll see there's a new user guide there explaining all of that. So that is there for your ingestion. And I think I mentioned earlier that the AI assistant's been trained on that as well. So that's aware of all those things too. And that's it. As I say, there's lots in there. I've only really just touched on the big ticket items, but there's a lot in Umango 25. Really excited to get this into your hands and get your feedback on it. Looking forward to you having a play and having to talk to your customers about all the benefits that Umango 25 brings. We're going to do a bit of a Q&A follow-up session after this. So you've watched this video, you've got a bit of a handle on what Umango 25 brings, but I know there's probably a lot of questions that comes from that. So be watching out for the upcoming Q&A session. Bring your questions and we will answer them in real time. And hopefully we're going to be able to give you the answers that you're after. But aside from that, thank you for spending the time to sit on this session and watch this video. Really appreciate all that you do for Umango, for your patience with us, and for working with us and partnering with us. Enjoy your day, and thanks for joining us.